The quiet observer, Marcus had always been the kind of person who preferred to stay in the background. At 22, he worked as a supply coordinator at Naval Base Coronado, the famous home of the Navy SEALs. Every morning, he would arrive before dawn to organize equipment, check inventories, and ensure that everything the elite warriors needed was ready and waiting. To most people on the base, Marcus was just another face in the crowd. He wore simple utility uniforms, carried a clipboard, and moved through the facilities with quiet efficiency. The SEALs barely noticed him as he restocked their gear rooms or delivered fresh equipment to their training areas. When they did acknowledge him, it was usually with a quick nod or a simple thanks before they rushed off to their next mission or training exercise. Marcus didn't mind being overlooked. In fact, he preferred it that way. His father had been a Navy mechanic, and his grandfather had served on destroyers during World War II. Military service ran in his blood, but Marcus had never seen himself as warrior material. He was thin, wore glasses, and had a quiet demeanor that seemed better suited for office work than combat operations. What people didn't know was that Marcus had grown up around boats and water. His father had taught him to swim before he could properly walk, and by the time he was 10, Marcus could navigate rough waters that would challenge experienced sailors. He had spent countless summers working on fishing boats, learning to read weather patterns, understand ocean currents, and handle himself in situations that would panic most people. When he joined the Navy, Marcus had initially planned to become a mechanic like his father. But a clerical error had placed him in supply operations, and he had simply accepted the assignment without complaint. He figured he could serve his country just as effectively by making sure the real heroes had what they needed to do their jobs. The SEAL teams at Coronado were legendary. These were men who could infiltrate enemy territory, survive in impossible conditions, and complete missions that seemed straight out of action movies. Marcus watched them train every day, admiring their dedication and skill, while never imagining he could be anything like them. During his first year on the base, Marcus had developed an unusual routine. After completing his official duties, he would often stay late to help with additional tasks that nobody had specifically assigned to him. He organized storage areas that had become cluttered, created more efficient systems for tracking equipment, and even began learning the specific preferences and needs of individual SEAL teams. Team Alpha preferred their communications equipment arranged in a particular order. Team Bravo always needed extra batteries for their night vision goggles. Team Charlie had developed modifications to their diving gear that required special attention during maintenance. Marcus began to anticipate these needs, having everything ready before anyone even asked for it. The SEALs started to notice his attention to detail, though they still saw him as just an exceptionally helpful supply guy. They began requesting Marcus specifically when they needed equipment prepared for missions. His reputation for reliability and thoroughness spread throughout the teams, but nobody questioned his background or wondered if there might be more to him than met the eye. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Rodriguez was the first person to really pay attention to Marcus as an individual rather than just a service provider. She was the executive officer responsible for coordinating training operations, and she had noticed that missions ran more smoothly when Marcus was involved in the preparation phase. One afternoon, she found him in the equipment bay, carefully inspecting diving gear that would be used for an underwater infiltration exercise the next day. Most supply personnel would have simply checked that all the pieces were present and accounted for. Marcus was examining each piece of equipment with the eye of someone who understood exactly how it would be used and what could go wrong. "You seem to know a lot about diving equipment for someone who works in supply," Rodriguez observed, watching as Marcus tested the regulator on a breathing apparatus. Marcus looked up, slightly embarrassed to be caught paying such close attention to gear that wasn't technically his responsibility. "My dad taught me about diving when I was young," he said simply. "I just want to make sure everything works properly." Rodriguez picked up a diving mask that Marcus had set aside. "What's wrong with this one?" "The seal around the lens is starting to deteriorate," Marcus explained, pointing to an area that looked perfectly normal to Rodriguez. "It might hold during a shallow dive, but if someone takes it deep, it could leak. Better to replace it now than have a problem during a mission." She examined the mask more closely and realized that Marcus was absolutely right. The deterioration was so subtle that most people would have missed it entirely, but he had spotted a potential failure that could have put a SEAL's life at risk during an actual operation. From that day forward, Rodriguez began to pay closer attention to Marcus. She noticed that he seemed to have an instinctive understanding of how equipment would perform under stress. She observed that he could look at a piece of gear and immediately identify potential problems that wouldn't become apparent to others until actual use. More importantly, she began to notice that Marcus moved through the base with a situational awareness that was unusual for someone in his position. He seemed to always know what was happening around him, who was approaching from behind, and when something was out of place. These were skills that the military tried to teach to combat personnel, but Marcus appeared to have developed them naturally. The first real test of Marcus's abilities came during a training exercise that went wrong. A SEAL team was practicing night infiltration techniques in the waters off the base when one of their boats experienced engine failure. The training area was known for its dangerous currents, and the disabled boat was drifting toward a rocky area where it could be smashed apart by the waves. Marcus happened to be working late in a waterfront building when he heard the distress call over the radio. He looked out the window and immediately understood the situation. The rescue boats were positioned too far away to reach the disabled craft before it hit the rocks, and the current was too strong for the SEALs to swim to safety. Without hesitation, Marcus grabbed a set of keys to a small utility boat that was moored nearby. He had no authority to take the boat, and using it without permission could result in serious disciplinary action. But he could see that lives were at risk, and he was probably the only person in position to help. Marcus reached the disabled boat just minutes before it would have been swept into the rocks. Working in complete darkness, with dangerous waves threatening to swamp both vessels, he managed to secure a tow line and pull the SEAL team to safety. The operation required precise boat handling skills and an intimate knowledge of local water conditions that few people on the base possessed. When the rescue boats finally arrived, they found Marcus calmly helping the SEALs transfer their equipment to his small utility vessel. He had not only saved them from potential disaster, but had done so with a level of skill and composure that impressed everyone who witnessed the rescue. The incident report made its way up through the chain of command, eventually reaching the desk of Admiral Patricia Walsh, the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Command. She read the account of Marcus's actions with growing interest, particularly the details about his boat handling abilities and his decision-making under pressure. Admiral Walsh had spent her entire career around elite military personnel. She knew how to recognize natural talent and leadership potential, even when it appeared in unexpected packages. The young supply coordinator who had risked his career to save a SEAL team was clearly more than he appeared to be. She decided to investigate Marcus's background more thoroughly. What she discovered surprised her. His personnel file was unremarkable, listing only basic qualifications and satisfactory performance reviews. But a deeper investigation revealed a young man who had grown up in conditions that would have prepared him for challenges that the Navy's most intensive training programs were designed to create. The Admiral also spoke privately with several SEAL team leaders about their interactions with Marcus. She learned that he had an unusual ability to anticipate their needs and understand their equipment requirements. More than one team leader mentioned that Marcus seemed to have an instinctive grasp of tactical thinking that was rare among support personnel. Most significantly, Rodriguez shared her observations about Marcus's natural situational awareness and his ability to spot equipment problems that others would miss. These were skills that could not be taught in a classroom. They were the result of natural aptitude combined with relevant experience. Admiral Walsh began to form a plan. The Navy was always looking for new ways to identify and develop talent, particularly for the special operations community. Marcus represented an unconventional candidate who might have exactly the kind of skills and mindset that would make him valuable to elite units. But first, she wanted to test her theory about his potential. She decided to arrange for Marcus to participate in some advanced training exercises, ostensibly to help with equipment management, but actually to observe how he would perform under more challenging conditions. The opportunity came when a joint training exercise was scheduled between Navy SEALs and Coast Guard rescue swimmers. The exercise would involve complex water operations, equipment coordination, and high-stress decision-making. It would be the perfect environment to evaluate Marcus's true capabilities while maintaining the appearance of routine support duties. Marcus had no idea that his actions during the boat rescue had attracted high-level attention. He continued his normal duties, still thinking of himself as just a supply coordinator who had happened to be in the right place at the right time. He assumed that the rescue incident would be quickly forgotten, and that he would continue his quiet service in the background of more important operations. He was about to discover that sometimes the most significant moments in a person's life begin with what seems like just another routine assignment. The test nobody knew was coming. Marcus received the assignment on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez approached his desk with a clipboard and what he assumed would be another routine equipment request. "We need you to coordinate supplies for a joint training exercise next week," she said, handing him a detailed list. "It's a big operation involving multiple teams, and they specifically requested you to handle the logistics." Marcus looked over the requirements and felt a flutter of nervousness. The scale was unlike anything he had handled before. Multiple SEAL teams would be working alongside Coast Guard units in a complex water-based exercise. The equipment needs included everything from diving gear to communication systems to emergency medical supplies. What he didn't know was that Admiral Walsh had personally designed this exercise to evaluate his capabilities. Every aspect of the operation had been carefully planned to test different skills: his organizational abilities, his performance under pressure, and most importantly, his potential for leadership when faced with unexpected challenges. The exercise was scheduled to take place at a remote training facility on San Clemente Island, about 60 miles off the California coast. The isolated location would create an environment where participants would have to rely entirely on their own skills and the supplies they brought with them. Marcus spent the next several days immersing himself in the planning details. He studied the exercise scenarios, researched the environmental conditions at the training site, and began to anticipate problems that might arise during the operations. His natural attention to detail kicked into high gear as he realized how many people would be depending on his preparation. He noticed that the standard equipment list didn't include backup communications gear for the maritime operations. Given the remote location and the complexity of the exercise, Marcus decided to add redundant radio systems without being specifically asked. He also included extra medical supplies beyond the normal requirements, reasoning that the isolated location would make evacuation difficult if someone was seriously injured. Most significantly, Marcus began studying the weather patterns and ocean conditions around San Clemente Island. His childhood experience with maritime weather told him that conditions could change rapidly in that area, and he wanted to be prepared for situations that might not be covered in the official exercise plans. The night before the exercise, Marcus was loading equipment onto the transport ship when he overheard a conversation between two SEAL instructors. They were discussing concerns about the weather forecast, which showed a possible storm system moving toward the area. "If the weather turns bad, we might have to call off the water operations," one instructor said. "The exercise plan doesn't really account for rough sea conditions." Marcus continued working, but his mind was racing. He had studied the weather patterns extensively, and he believed the storm predictions were probably wrong. The meteorological data he had reviewed suggested that the weather system would move north of the island, creating challenging but manageable conditions rather than the dangerous storms the forecast predicted. He faced a difficult decision. Should he speak up and share his analysis, even though weather prediction wasn't his responsibility? Or should he stay quiet and let the instructors make their own decisions based on official forecasts? Marcus decided to prepare for both possibilities. He secretly added additional cold water gear to the equipment manifest, along with extra emergency supplies that would be useful if the exercise had to be extended due to weather delays. If his weather analysis was correct, the teams would face more challenging conditions than expected, and they would need equipment that wasn't on the standard list. The transport ship departed for San Clemente Island early the next morning. Marcus found himself assigned to a small cabin with several other support personnel, but he spent most of the voyage on deck, watching the sky and ocean conditions. As they approached the island, it became clear that Marcus's weather analysis had been correct. Instead of the dangerous storms that had been forecast, they encountered strong winds and rough seas that were challenging but not prohibitive. The exercise could proceed, but it would be more difficult than originally planned. Admiral Walsh was observing the exercise from a command ship positioned several miles offshore. She had arranged to receive regular reports about how Marcus was handling the increased complexity, and she was particularly interested in whether he would adapt to the changing conditions or simply follow his original plans. The first indication of Marcus's true capabilities came when the SEAL teams arrived at their staging area and discovered that he had anticipated their needs perfectly. The cold water gear he had added to the equipment list turned out to be essential as the water temperature was significantly lower than expected due to the weather conditions. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez was supervising the equipment distribution when she realized that Marcus had somehow predicted problems that even the exercise planners had missed. "How did you know to bring the extra thermal protection?" she asked him. "The weather data suggested the water temperature might drop," Marcus replied simply, not mentioning that he had contradicted the official forecast to make that decision. "I thought it would be better to have it and not need it than the other way around." As the exercise progressed, Marcus found himself becoming more involved in the operational aspects than he had expected. When communication problems arose between the shore teams and the ships offshore, he was asked to help troubleshoot the radio systems. When equipment failures occurred, he was called upon to find creative solutions using the supplies available on the island. Most challengingly, when several participants became seasick due to the rough conditions, Marcus found himself helping to coordinate medical care and evacuation procedures. This responsibility was far beyond his normal duties, but he handled it with a calm competence that impressed everyone who worked with him. The real test came on the second day of the exercise when a Coast Guard swimmer became separated from his team during a rescue simulation. The swimmer had been practicing helicopter insertion techniques when strong winds blew him off course. He was somewhere in the waters around the island, but his exact location was unknown. The official search and rescue protocols required coordinating multiple boats and aircraft in a systematic grid search. But Marcus knew from his study of local ocean conditions that the current patterns around the island would carry a person in a specific direction. He believed he could predict where the missing swimmer would end up. Once again, Marcus faced the choice between staying in his assigned role or speaking up with information that could save a life. This time, he didn't hesitate. "Sir," he said to the exercise commander, "I think I know where he might be." The commander looked at him with surprise. Marcus was supposed to be handling equipment logistics, not participating in tactical decision-making. But the urgency of the situation made everyone willing to listen to any potentially useful information. Marcus explained his analysis of the current patterns and predicted that the missing swimmer would be carried toward a specific area on the north side of the island. His explanation demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of maritime conditions that was unexpected from someone in his position. The search teams were redirected based on Marcus's prediction, and the missing swimmer was found exactly where Marcus had suggested he would be. The rescue was completed successfully, and what could have been a tragic accident became just another training scenario. Admiral Walsh received a detailed report about Marcus's role in the rescue operation. She learned that he had not only predicted the swimmer's location accurately, but had done so using analytical skills that demonstrated advanced tactical thinking. More importantly, she learned that Marcus had repeatedly made decisions throughout the exercise that went beyond his assigned responsibilities. He had taken initiative to solve problems, anticipated needs that others had missed, and demonstrated leadership qualities even while maintaining the appearance of following orders. The Admiral decided it was time to take more direct action. She arranged to visit the training site personally on the final day of the exercise, ostensibly to observe the closing ceremonies, but actually to meet Marcus face-to-face. When she arrived on San Clemente Island, Admiral Walsh found Marcus in the equipment staging area, carefully organizing gear for the return voyage to the mainland. He was working with the same quiet efficiency he had always shown, apparently unaware that his actions during the exercise had attracted high-level attention. "Petty Officer Chen," she said, approaching his workstation. Marcus looked up and immediately snapped to attention when he recognized the Admiral's insignia. He had never spoken directly to an officer of her rank, and he wondered if he was in trouble for some mistake he had made during the exercise. "Yes, ma'am," he responded formally. "I understand you've been instrumental in making this exercise successful," Admiral Walsh said, studying his face carefully. "I'd like to hear your assessment of how things have gone." Marcus was unsure how to respond. He didn't want to seem like he was trying to take credit for work that belonged to others, but he also wanted to give an honest evaluation if the Admiral was asking for his opinion. "The teams performed excellently, ma'am," he said carefully. "The equipment held up well under the challenging conditions, and everyone adapted effectively when circumstances changed." Admiral Walsh noticed that Marcus had focused his response on other people's performance rather than highlighting his own contributions. This was exactly the kind of selfless attitude that she looked for in potential leaders. "I understand you made some modifications to the equipment manifest based on your own weather analysis," she continued. "That kind of initiative isn't typically expected from support personnel." Marcus felt a moment of panic, wondering if he was being criticized for overstepping his authority. "I just wanted to make sure the teams had what they needed if conditions turned out to be different than expected," he said. "And the missing swimmer incident," Admiral Walsh pressed. "How did you know where to look for him?" "I grew up around boats, ma'am," Marcus explained. "My father taught me to read water conditions and understand how currents work. When I heard the description of where the swimmer had gone into the water, I could visualize how the current would carry him." Admiral Walsh nodded thoughtfully. She was beginning to understand that Marcus's capabilities were the result of a unique combination of natural talent, relevant experience, and careful observation. These were exactly the qualities that made exceptional special operations personnel, but they had been hidden beneath the quiet demeanor of a supply coordinator. "Petty Officer Chen," she said finally, "how would you feel about taking on additional responsibilities that would better utilize your skills?" Marcus wasn't sure what she meant, but he sensed that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. He had spent 2 years thinking of himself as just a background player in other people's important missions. Now the highest-ranking officer in naval special warfare was suggesting that he might have a more significant role to play. "I would be honored to serve wherever you think I would be most useful, ma'am," he replied. Admiral Walsh smiled for the first time since arriving on the island. She had found exactly what she had been looking for, a person with exceptional potential who was ready to step up to greater challenges without losing the humility and dedication that had made him valuable in his current role. "Report to my office when we return to Coronado," she instructed. "We have some things to discuss about your future in the Navy." As the Admiral walked away, Marcus stood alone in the equipment staging area, trying to process what had just happened. He had no idea what kind of additional responsibilities she had in mind, but he sensed that his quiet days as an unnoticed supply coordinator were coming to an end. The return voyage to the mainland gave him time to think about the conversation. For the first time in his life, Marcus began to wonder if he might be capable of more than he had ever imagined. The possibility was both exciting and terrifying, but he knew there was only one way to find out what the Admiral had in mind. The salute that changed everything. Marcus spent the week following the San Clemente Island exercise in a state of nervous anticipation. He had reported to Admiral Walsh's office as instructed, but her assistant had scheduled him for the following Friday, giving him 7 days to wonder what kind of future the Admiral had in mind for him. During those 7 days, Marcus noticed that other people on the base had begun treating him differently. Word had spread about his role in the successful rescue operation and his exceptional performance during the exercise. SEALs, who had previously barely acknowledged his existence, now stopped to chat with him about equipment and training matters. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez had also changed her interactions with him. She began asking for his input on training scenarios and equipment decisions, treating him more like a consultant than a subordinate. Marcus found these conversations both flattering and intimidating, as they required him to think about military operations from a strategic perspective he had never considered before. The most significant change came from Master Chief Petty Officer James Sullivan, the senior enlisted advisor for SEAL Team 3. Sullivan was a legendary figure on the base, a 25-year veteran who had served in combat operations around the world. He was known for his ability to identify potential in young sailors and his skill at preparing them for the challenges of special operations. On Thursday afternoon, Sullivan approached Marcus while he was organizing equipment in the dive locker. "Chen," he said in his characteristic gruff voice, "walk with me." They left the building and headed toward the beach where SEAL candidates conducted their brutal training exercises. Marcus had seen these sessions from a distance, but had never had reason to observe them closely. "See those guys?" Sullivan pointed to a group of trainees who were struggling through surf drills in the cold Pacific Ocean. "Every one of them thinks he knows what it takes to be a SEAL. Most of them are wrong." Marcus watched the trainees battling the waves, their faces showing the strain of intense physical effort. He wondered why Sullivan was showing him this scene. "The thing about special operations," Sullivan continued, "is that it's not really about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about being smart enough to solve problems when everything goes wrong and tough enough to keep going when most people would quit." They walked along the beach in silence for several minutes before Sullivan spoke again. "I've been watching you for 2 years, Chen. I've seen how you handle pressure, how you think through problems, and how you put other people's needs ahead of your own. Those are the qualities that actually matter in this business." Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with disbelief. The idea that someone like Master Chief Sullivan had been observing him was both flattering and intimidating. "The Admiral is going to offer you something tomorrow," Sullivan said bluntly. "Something that will change your life completely. Before you make your decision, you need to understand what you're getting into." He explained that the Navy was launching a new program designed to identify and develop unconventional candidates for special operations roles. Instead of relying only on traditional volunteers who sought out elite units, they were looking for people who had demonstrated exceptional potential in other roles. Marcus would be offered the opportunity to undergo SEAL training, but with a modified program that would build on his existing skills while developing the additional capabilities he would need for combat operations. If he succeeded, he would become part of a select group of operators with unique backgrounds and specializations. "It won't be easy," Sullivan warned. "In fact, it might be harder than regular SEAL training because you'll be held to a higher standard. Everyone will expect you to fail because you didn't come up through the conventional path." The conversation gave Marcus a lot to think about as he prepared for his meeting with Admiral Walsh. He had always admired the SEALs from a distance, but he had never seriously considered that he might become one of them. The possibility was both exciting and terrifying. Friday morning arrived with unusual clarity, as if the entire base was holding its breath for something significant to happen. Marcus put on his best uniform and made his way to the Admiral's office in the headquarters building. Admiral Walsh's office was larger and more formal than any space Marcus had ever entered. The walls were covered with photographs from her distinguished career, awards and commendations, and memorabilia from operations around the world. Behind her desk, large windows provided a view of the Pacific Ocean where so many naval operations had begun. "Petty Officer Chen," Admiral Walsh said as he entered. "Please have a seat." Marcus sat in a leather chair facing her desk, trying to project confidence while fighting nervousness about the conversation that was about to unfold. "I've spent considerable time reviewing your performance and potential," the Admiral began. "What I've discovered is a young sailor with exceptional natural abilities who has been significantly underutilized in his current role." She explained that his actions during the San Clemente Island exercise had demonstrated skills that were rare even among experienced special operations personnel. His ability to analyze complex situations, anticipate problems, and make critical decisions under pressure were exactly the qualities the Navy needed in its elite units. "I'm prepared to offer you the opportunity to undergo specialized training that would prepare you for assignment to naval special warfare units," Admiral Walsh said. "This would be a complete career change that would require you to meet the same standards as any other SEAL while bringing your unique background and skills to the teams." Marcus felt his heart racing as he processed the magnitude of what was being offered. The chance to become a SEAL was something he had never even dreamed of pursuing. "There are no guarantees," the Admiral continued. "The training is designed to push people to their absolute limits, and many candidates who seem perfectly qualified don't make it through. But based on what I've observed about your character and capabilities, I believe you have an excellent chance of success." She gave him 24 hours to make his decision, explaining that the specialized training program would begin in 2 weeks if he chose to accept the challenge. That evening, Marcus called his father to discuss the opportunity. His dad listened quietly as Marcus explained the Admiral's offer and his own mixed feelings about pursuing such a dramatic career change. "Son," his father said finally, "your grandfather always told me that the Navy would give you chances to discover who you really are. But you have to be brave enough to take those chances when they come. This sounds like one of those moments." Marcus spent a sleepless night thinking about the decision. By morning, he knew what his answer would be. He returned to Admiral Walsh's office at the appointed time and formally accepted the opportunity to undergo SEAL training. The Admiral seemed pleased but not surprised by his decision. "There's one more thing," she said. "The program you'll be entering is still classified, so very few people on the base will know the details of what you're doing. To most observers, you'll simply be participating in advanced training exercises." She explained that his transition would begin with several weeks of intensive preparation, designed to bring his physical fitness up to SEAL standards while maintaining his other duties in a reduced capacity. Marcus left the Admiral's office feeling as though his entire world had shifted. He was still the same person he had been an hour earlier, but his future had completely changed direction. The next several weeks passed in a blur of intense physical training, academic study, and practical exercises designed to prepare him for the challenges ahead. Marcus discovered that his natural fitness level was better than he had realized, and his military bearing improved dramatically as he embraced his new identity. The other personnel on the base began to notice changes in how Marcus carried himself and approached his work. He seemed more confident and decisive, though he maintained the same humble attitude that had always characterized his interactions with others. The most significant moment came 6 weeks into his preparation, when Admiral Walsh announced that she would be conducting a formal review of the base's training programs. As part of the review, she would observe various exercises and recognize outstanding performance by personnel at all levels. Marcus had no idea that this review was actually designed as a graduation ceremony for his transition into the Special Operations community. Admiral Walsh wanted to publicly acknowledge his new status while maintaining the security requirements around his specialized training. The ceremony was scheduled for a Friday afternoon in the main assembly hall. All base personnel were required to attend, and the agenda included presentations about various training achievements and recognition of exceptional performance. Marcus was told to report in his dress uniform, which he assumed meant he would be receiving some kind of routine commendation related to his work during the San Clemente Island exercise. When he arrived at the assembly hall, he was surprised to see that his parents had been invited to attend the ceremony. His father was wearing his old Navy dress uniform, and his mother was beaming with pride, though she didn't yet know why they had been asked to come. Admiral Walsh began the ceremony with remarks about the importance of recognizing excellence at all levels of naval service. She spoke about the need to identify and develop talent wherever it appeared, regardless of someone's original assignment or background. "Today," she announced, "I want to recognize a young sailor who exemplifies the kind of initiative, intelligence, and dedication that makes our Navy strong." Marcus felt a growing sense of anticipation as he realized that he was probably about to receive more recognition than he had expected. "Petty Officer Marcus Chen," Admiral Walsh continued, "has demonstrated exceptional performance in every assignment he has undertaken. More importantly, he has shown the kind of leadership potential and operational capability that we look for in our most elite units." She described his actions during the rescue operation and his performance during the San Clemente Island exercise, painting a picture of someone who had consistently exceeded expectations while maintaining the humility and teamwork that characterized the best military personnel. "It is my privilege," Admiral Walsh announced, "to inform Petty Officer Chen and everyone present that he has been selected for assignment to Naval Special Warfare units upon successful completion of specialized training." The assembly hall erupted in applause as Marcus tried to process what was happening. This was far more than a simple commendation. The Admiral was publicly announcing his acceptance into the SEAL community. "Petty Officer Chen," Admiral Walsh said, "please join me on the platform." Marcus walked to the front of the assembly hall in a daze, still unable to believe that this moment was actually happening. When he reached the platform, Admiral Walsh gestured for him to stand at attention facing the assembled crowd. "In recognition of his exceptional service and his acceptance into Naval Special Warfare training," she announced, "I am pleased to present Petty Officer Chen with the Navy Achievement Medal and to offer him the first salute he will receive as a future member of our Special Operations community." Admiral Walsh stepped directly in front of Marcus and rendered a crisp military salute. The gesture was unprecedented. Admirals did not typically salute enlisted personnel, and certainly not in such a formal, public manner. Marcus returned the salute with precision he didn't know he possessed, feeling the weight of the moment and the magnitude of what it represented. The entire assembly hall had fallen completely silent, recognizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary. As they held the salute, Marcus could see his parents in the audience, his father standing at attention with tears streaming down his face and his mother covering her mouth in amazement. He could see Master Chief Sullivan nodding with approval, and Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez smiling with the satisfaction of someone whose faith in him had been vindicated. Most significantly, he could see the faces of SEALs throughout the audience. Men who had barely acknowledged his existence just months earlier, now looking at him with respect and acceptance as a future member of their brotherhood. When Admiral Walsh finally dropped her salute, she stepped closer to Marcus and spoke quietly so that only he could hear. "You've earned this moment," she said. "Now comes the real work of proving that my faith in you was justified." As the ceremony concluded and people began to file out of the assembly hall, Marcus was surrounded by well-wishers and congratulations from people throughout the base. But the moment that meant the most came when his father approached him with pride and emotion written across his weathered face. "Your grandfather would be so proud," his father said, embracing him tightly. "You've honored our family and your country." Marcus realized that his journey was just beginning. The specialized training ahead would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine, and there would be no guarantees of success. But for the first time in his life, he truly understood his own potential and felt ready to pursue the challenges that lay ahead. The quiet supply coordinator who had preferred to work in the background had discovered that sometimes the most important moments in life require stepping into the spotlight and accepting the responsibility that comes with recognition. Admiral Walsh's salute had not just acknowledged his past achievements. It had marked the beginning of a new chapter in which he would have the opportunity to serve his country at the highest level. As Marcus left the assembly hall, still wearing his dress uniform and his new achievement medal, he carried with him the memory of that unprecedented salute and the knowledge that his true test as a warrior was just beginning.